how they were and what the weather was what's your view of what happened between 1933 and 1945. And of course most contemporary Germans want to make money, they want to get away from as much of that as possible, they want to redefine the nature of who and what they are, and so on. They don't even want to discuss it. Syberberg's in a sense going straight for that heart of darkness, in Conrad's sense of the term. He's going straight there, without equivocation, but artistically, because he knows that if you don't, in a sense, bring this material to the surface, art in post-war Germany, in other words, morally truthful creativity, is impossible. You see this in many careers, actually. Look at the famous leftist to green novelist Günter Grass, who, seen as an anti, seen as a sort of centre-left stalwart of the Adenauer post-war government and so on, then it's suddenly revealed, almost right at the end of his cultural trajectory as he's coming to an end, almost the last book, that he served for a fraction of a time when he was a youth. He had no choice, but he served in the Waffen-SS, and how this has almost led to a perspectival altering, not just of one book or one incident when he was a late teenager, but of his whole career. In other words, truly the unmastered past. Because, bluntly, this is what Syberberg has been dealing with since the very beginning, not the end where it's sort of looked back on when you've written a shelf load of books to prepare for the moment, but as the first step to dealing with the possibility of the last moment. Now, the film had a reasonable success and was shown in art cinemas all over the world. It was shown extensively in the United States, where it was seen as an elegy and an indictment, that sort of thing. Susan Sontag wrote extensively about it. She wrote an essay called Fascinating Fascism, which is largely based on that film. And Paul Lacan-Lemaitre, a reasonably well-known French critic, he also wrote a review of it. It seemed reasonably successful, far too artistic and obscure for many people. Some of the German is very complicated and the translation terse and so on, although the English language version isn't too bad, because the BBC got some expert German linguists in, because they half-financed the thing in the first instance. Now, after Hitler, he moved on to do this film of the Wagner opera, which again is an attempt at what Brecht would call epic theatre, and also what Wagner had wanted by the idea of total art and high opera, which obviously would have lent itself to the idea of total film, total theatre, total art. Brecht had the concept of epic theatre, and Syberberg's always been very pro-Brecht, not ideologically, but because it's the desire to make great statements that are great German statements. Indeed, his views of Brecht were quite unfashionable once Brecht went east and became almost, the sort of privileged puppet master of the Berlin Ensemble. And, they all said they were oppressed and made to do it now. But in actual fact, of course, they loved every minute. And he had his own chauffeur, private flat, private public flat, guards, limousine, the whole works. But he went to the East and did a film about Brecht and his legacy, because he was a great German. Again, you'll sense that equivocal element in Syberberg, as well as the pride of an Easterner as well. Because as we all know, there is a distinction between the East and West German sensibilities, which has been exaggerated and exacerbated by the fractured nature of their experience in the post-war period. Even politically today, there's a disjunction between the amputated limb of the East that's been put into sort of cryogenic storage and repositioned back on the rest of the trunk. Now, Syberberg's opera of Possible is a truly extraordinary opera. It can be obtained on Amazon and so on for very small amounts of money now. That opera, which essentially preaches not just total art, but total redemption through love and the creation of a Germanicized Christianity, a sort of de-Judaicized Christianity in many ways, is a chance for Syberberg to luxuriate, his critics would say, fetishistically wallow in Germanicism and in culture of deep linguistic romanticism that is outside politics, but types of extreme politics grow from it. The thing about his type of work is that there is no distinction, as there usually is, between political statements, aesthetic statements, ideological statements, philosophical ones. They're all merged into, if not a total attitude towards the world, sort of Weltanschauung, but a total attitude towards art, because for Syberberg, art is the world. It's the view that it's more important than creativity of that level, it's more important than life and death, which to most people is just sort of highfalutin nonsense. But Syberberg sort of believes in it with a passion, and this has made him, particularly with the material that he wishes to deal with, very, very unfashionable. After about 1990, he found it increasingly difficult, certainly in the Federal Republic, to raise money to make films. Possibly he'd come to the end of his trajectory. Made a film about Karl May, made a film about the Wagner family, made a film about Ludwig II, made a film of Wagner's opera Parsifal, made his enormous film Hitler, did these shorter films when he was younger. He was in a philosophical, narrative-based and yet largely linguistic film where people discussed their ideas, including some famous elderly German actors called The Ister, which was made in 2004. And he has a producer role in that and a performance role as one of the philosophical spokesmen. Since then he's done not very much, apart from all being allowed to do too much in film, which always costs money if you're going to have it disseminated with any public prominence beyond the internet. He published this book, however, in 1990, which I've already referred to, called The Misfortunes and Fortunes of an Artist Born in Germany After the Second War. This created an enormous cultural war, as they're called, into Germany at the time. It's largely forgotten now, but not by some of its protagonists. Many people who were associated with Syberberg until then dropped him after that, and he became a little bit of an unperson. During this book he says that Germany is essentially culturally, contemporary Germany is essentially culturally rotten and has destroyed itself and is self-hating and ironically in relation to everything connected with the past is philo-Semitic, excessively so. And this is what really did for him, I think. I remember Michael Walker of Scorpion magazine, who had I think become a German citizen by then, writing in one issue of that publication that Syberberg better know what he's doing because the way things are going, he won't be making too many films in the future.